Hello all. Originally I'm from West Virginia. I moved around between the Appalachian and the Midwest, some as a kid. Between the ages of 10 to 13, I lived in rural Kentucky, in the foothills of one of the oldest mountain ranges on the planet. I lived with my dad and my grams. We lived in what we call a holler. Think of it like a cul-de-sac in between a set of foothills. We lived in the middle of the neighborhood, with nothing but family on both sides. No one lived across from us or behind us because of the foothills. When I moved in, my grams had some rules I had to follow. At the time, I chalked them up to hillbilly stranger danger. There were things like, don't mess around with the wild animals, don't go out into the woods alone. Then they got a little weird. Don't whistle. If you hear your name, don't answer and don't go to it. And if you see someone in the woods, you might know. No, you didn't, and just come home. This experience happened in August when I was 11. My dad and I had a mowed path through the tall grass and berry bushes to the left of the double wide we lived in. We camped out there a lot because it was close enough that we could check on my grams. Now, when you're in the woods, things are louder than you think. You have animal life, bugs chattering, wind through the trees and grass. There was a stream that ran along the road you could easily hear. That night, we added the campfire to that list. My dad decided to go back up to the house about a quarter mile to get more beer and to check on grams. Before he left, he told me not to mess with the fire. After a few minutes of watching the fire, things started to get quiet. Like real quiet. The wind had all but stopped. Bug and animal sounds were all gone, and the stream sounded like it was miles away. I was getting uncomfortable, even though I've been left at the campground before, like this. Then I started to smell and taste it. It was in the back of my throat, out of nowhere. This awful metal tang. After a few more moments of dread, my dad came back. He was mad right away, said he could smell burning metal coming up the trail. He accused me of tossing beer cans in the fire. I told him I didn't, and even pointed to the fire to prove it. He said there was a storm coming in, and we needed to get back home, and he let it go. We left the tent and started our way back. Now the very cool but very weird thing about lightning in woods, this dense, is when the lighting hits, it lights up everything, like the middle of the day, well up until the front of the trees. After the first set of trees, it's pitch black. There are no street lights, and unless you have lights on your property, it's completely black. So it's pitch black, lightly raining, and other than the dim lights from the house windows, there's nothing. I'm eating watermelon as one dose in August, in the mountains when the first clap of lighting hits. Everything is as bright as it can be. After the second passes, it's black as pitch aging. Next clap of lighting comes, and that's when I kind of see it. On the porch, past the yard, over the stream, past the road and the ditches on either side. Just past the first line of trees, I could see the silhouette of it. Then it goes dark. This is also when I can't start to taste that same awful burning metal. I'm not really sure what I saw, so I just kind of stay still. It's a few moments before the lighting hits aging. The figure is now closer, standing side by side to the trees. Then it's back aging. I'm standing now, not sure what to do. It's been 20 years to this day, and I've tried, but could never fully describe what I saw. This thing's head wasn't proportioned to its body. The arms were too long, and the torso didn't fit right. It was like if you asked a blind person to draw what a person looked like. It just didn't look correct. Once the lighting hit aging, the thing is standing in the middle of the road. Not wanting to see this thing get any closer, I go inside. My grams is doing dishes and asks why I'm inside. I tell her I think I saw something. She almost immediately gets my dad on his feet, telling him to shut and lock all the windows and doors. My dad, vaguely drunk, obeys. That night I sleep with her. The next day we discover the tent door is torn off. It didn't look like an animal. Things weren't cut or shredded, but looked like someone took and pulled it apart. My uncle, who lived a mile or so up, had all 8 chickens killed. Heads gone, no blood. The next few weeks, all the kids had to wait for the bus with an adult. My dad had to be late for work for almost 3 weeks. Anytime I tried to talk about it, I just had the subject change. I just figured I was a kid and it wasn't important or real. It wasn't until years later I finally understood. I was in my early 20s, and some cousins were in town for Halloween. As I was telling this story, my aunt get irate with me saying, "Don't you tell them that? Don't you put that evil on them?" After I couldn't help but think back on all the times I tried to talk about it and how I was shunned. My kid mind not realizing it wasn't as simple as a subject change, but then actively shushing me. Once I started dipping my toes in Reddit, I realized there was a name for this fucking thing. The same name my auntie had called it that day at the party, and other people have seen it. The Goat Man. What bothers me the most is how to this day I couldn't describe any feature, nor have I ever tasted that awful burning metal taste. So friends, if you ever find yourself in the foothills of Kentucky, please remember my Graham's rules. I don't like to use the term skinwalker to describe the hellspawn that wander the Appalachian Mountains. I say this because the only people that believe in skinwalkers are the ones who have actually seen them. I sure as hell didn't believe in any such thing until about 2 weeks ago. The Appalachian Mountains had always been a place that I wanted to visit. The pictures on Google were enough for me. The place is fucking beautiful. I had heard a few stories about skinwalkers roaming around the mountains during the night, which just made it all the more interesting. So I saved up some money, rented a cabin, and flew out here to experience the mountain lifestyle for a couple of weeks. The first few days were completely normal. I had gotten settled in and felt completely fine. Hiking some surrounding trails is all that I can recall for the first 3 or 4 days. It was on that 5th day that everything began going to shit. The cabin that I had rented had 2 big floodlights facing the backyard. Every night a coyote would walk past my cabin, causing the lights to turn on. I thought nothing of it. It was honestly kind of cute. On the 5th night of my stay, I was sitting in the living room watching some satellite TV. In the corner of my eye, I saw the floodlights flick on. I jumped up to go see my new coyote friend through the window. Let's just say that whatever caused my floodlights to turn on that night was not a fucking coyote. Its body looked completely normal except for the legs. The legs were extremely long and skinny, probably 3 times longer than any normal coyote. The thing just stared at me. My fight or flight didn't kick in. All I could do was stare back into its empty eyes. This fucking creature then let out the loudest, most blood-curdling scream I've ever heard, then got even closer to the window. I turned around to grab my phone so I could call the police. As I was walking to the couch, the floodlights turned off. The soft glow of the old TV screen was the only thing lighting the living room. I grabbed my phone and sprinted upstairs to my room. My first instinct was to hide in the closet, so I did just that. The closet doors had little slits in them so I could kind of see what was going on outside. I picked up my phone and tried to call the police. There was one slight problem though. My phone was fucking dead. It was around this point that I heard knocking coming from my front door. The knocking continued for what felt like an hour. I literally had no idea what to do, so I just sat there, hoping that it would stop. It eventually did stop, but shortly after, I heard the door open. No kicking the door in or anything, it just opened. I started to cry. I could hear faint footsteps getting louder and faster as it went up the stairs. It eventually got to my room, where I thought I was dead for sure. I could hear it opening drawers and messing with my bed sheets. I peered through one of the slits in the door, but I couldn't really see anything. That was until the creature put its disgusting, rotting face right up against the door. It was breathing so loudly that it was hurting my ears. I pushed myself back into a corner and used one of my jackets to cover me. It was my last option. I don't know how long I sat there, but it felt like an eternity. I eventually peeked out from behind my jacket to see some light coming through the doors. I stood up and looked out. It was daytime. I couldn't hear the creature anymore. I assumed that it got spooked by the sunlight and left. I slowly opened my closet door. It was finally safe. Needless to say, I got the fuck out of there and I'm never going back. I don't want to see a therapist because they won't believe me. They'll think I'm insane. Maybe I am insane, I don't know. All I know is that whenever the locals of the Appalachian Mountains talk about these things, they aren't lying. I refrain myself from putting my name out on here, but I just can't keep this to myself anymore. Last year, despite all that was going on, I decided to vacation to a small cabin in the Appalachian Mountains. It wasn't any more than 500 square feet, but it was enough for me to get away from it all. And before you ask, I followed all the rules for going on a trip alone. I gave my friends and family my location and the date I expected to return, and kept a radio on me for emergencies along with my sidearm, just in case. I began driving February 16th, and by the 18th I was driving up to the cabin. It was late at night, and the only thing on my mind was the bed waiting for me inside. I got out of my car and stared at my trunk with my bags and just thought, fuck it, and decided to unload tomorrow morning. Honestly, I wish I hadn't. As I walked up to the porch of the cabin, the wood steps creaking below my feet, echoing into the forest around me, I heard what sounded like clicking. Click, 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 click. It was faint but loud enough to get my attention. I spun around, only to see my parked car. The clicking stopped. Jesus Christ, I need sleep, I thought, unlocking the door. Walking into the cabin, I flick on and then off the lights and flopped onto the bed, fully dressed, and just passed out. A few hours later, I was woken up by a scream. It sounded like a woman's, and it immediately woke me up. I laid on my stomach, in the darkness, waiting to hear it again. My heart pounded. Every second felt like minutes, every minute felt like hours, until I heard it again. A shrill, blood-curdling scream out in the forest, distant but not more than half a mile away. What should I do? I slowly got up and grabbed my sidearm. I can't do nothing. I sprang up and ran to my car, but only when I reached out my car door was open. I turned on my phone light, and what I saw wasn't good. My car doors and trunk were all open, and my stuff, including my ammo and first aid kit, were gone. I was panicking. I got into the driver's seat and tried to start my car. Over and over I tried to start it, and then it stalled. I smashed my fist down into the horn, screaming in a fit of rage and panic. And then the screaming began again. A woman's distant scream drove me to do something, anything, so I grabbed my flashlight, formed the glove box, and rushed into the forest. For hours I walked into the direction of the screaming, and after 3 hours of walking, the screaming came from the opposite direction. I ran, back towards the sound, surely to find an injured woman back at the cabin, but I only found more trees. Before I knew it, I was lost. And then the woods went dead silent. No crickets, no wind, no screaming. Now I was bringing to really panic, disoriented, and now in dead silence. In a flurry of paranoia, I flipped on my flashlight, and all around me, thousands of them, eyes, glowing eyes surrounded me. I then remembered my old ranger training, and I immediately leaned my head to one side and began running. I figured my equilibrium was off for some reason, and then I realized it was them, whatever the fuck those eyes belonged to. There wasn't any woman, it was all them. I ran as fast as I could. I heard them following me, the fleshy tapping of feet, the knocking of hooves, the flapping of wings, all behind me. Soon I reached a river, and then I began sprinting, hard. My lungs were on fire, my heart was about to burst. I ran for what felt like hours, and suddenly I stumbled upon a small town. Lights and a small gas station were my salvation. I ran into the streetlights and turned around to the woods with my gun and flashlight on the forest. The eyes just sat at the edge of the forest, staring at me. I backed up to the pump of the gas station and sat there, staring at them too, until eventually the sun came up. The owner of the gas station arrived and gave me a ride to the police station, where I was able to call my friends for a ride home. Once I got home, I got myself weekly therapy appointments and just kept my mouth shut to everyone but my therapist about what happened. My friends think I ended up getting robbed. I couldn't tell them what happened. They wouldn't believe me. But maybe you will. I don't know what those things were or why the hell they were there. Just do not vacation to the Appalachians for your own safety.